Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Noah Rothman is senior writer for National Review. Hello, Noah. How are you?
I'm doing well, Hugh. Good to see you.
Thank you. I've got to read to you a excerpt from this morning's news items by John Ellis. I don't know if you read news items by John Ellis, but it's the first thing I read in the morning because it's a comprehensive survey of the news. And he went and he found a piece by David Autor, who's with MIT's lab on the future of the economy. And he writes, Autor writes, we're in the midst of a totally different competition with China now that's much, much more important. We're not talking about commodity furniture and tube socks. We're talking about semiconductors and drones and aviation, electrical vehicles, shipping, fusion power, quantum, AI, robotics. These are the sectors where the U.S. still maintains competitiveness, but they're extremely threatened. China's capacity for high-tech, low-cost, incredibly fast, innovative manufacturing is just unbelievable. And the Trump administration is basically fighting the war of 20 years ago. The loss of those jobs, was not devastating to those places. It was not devastating to the U.S. economy as a whole. But if we lose Boeing, GM, and Apple and Intel, and that's quite possible, then we will be economically devastated. What do you think of that, Noah? Doomsaying or reality?
Well, I'm by no means an expert. I detect a measure of doomsaying in it. I don't necessarily think it's unfounded. These are valuable warnings. I mean, what you described there are the commanding heights of the economy of the 21st century. We're not talking
Right.
about steel and utilities and the sort of stuff that the mixed economies would absorb and attempt to, shave down the sharp edges of economic life. You're talking about very high-end sectors that require a lot of research and high-end operators to use them. So there's going to be plenty of disruption. And that's one thing that people get really afraid of domestically, particularly those in the United States who talk about AI. They say there's going to be profound disruption. There's going to be a lot of people who are going to lose their jobs, and we're going to see rampant Luddism and the sort of the kind of action in the streets that's suggestive of profound economic unrest. And I think that can be overstated in part because American manufacturing, people who work in American manufacturing right now, are highly technically inclined, really well trained. There's very few low tech manufacturing jobs in this country. In fact, we have a lot of open manufacturing jobs because they require a lot of intensive experience and training in order to get into that sector. Those individuals will be able to shop those skills in other sectors as well. If they don't excel in AI dominated sectors, in high end tech sectors. So I'm more sanguine than some of the folks who are predicting doom for our high tech future. But as I said, I'm no expert.
Now, I want to be a bit of a Luddite myself, and at least in the proposal. A second headline today from the Financial Times is U.S. universities face a $1 billion revenue hit over foreign student fears. Turns out that the United States academic establishment collects $1 billion in foreign tuition. Doesn't give me the numbers of students yet, but this is every university aggregate. That's a lot of students to account for $1 billion. What do you think, Noah? Should our universities be inviting the world to come here ahead of Americans?
Well, not ahead of Americans, and I don't think that's stipulated in that, is it? That Americans
No,
don't have
it's
access
not.
to
I'm
American
just saying
education? No.
if
It's
you
not a
if
zero
you
sum game. It's
deny
just it's
if
just a
you
failure
deny
to
foreign
to
student.
imagine that this is a zero sum game. We contribute to the education of the world, yes. We also retain a fair amount of that talent after we educate it. We should retain more. We should not be pushing the people who come to the United States to receive a top tier education back to their home countries necessarily, unless we do so as we imbue them with the cultural spirit and civic pride of the United States and the smaller Republican system. I'd love to seed the world with that kind of talent. I joke that the degree to which my fellow conservatives talk about how corrupting the universities are, and they are, and the extent to which they pollute uh, uh, more commercial enterprises with the kind of cultural politics that dominates campuses. We should be welcoming every CCP official's kid to this country and then reintegrating them back into the Communist Party of the Chinese, as a subversive action. But that's just not the case. That's obviously a joke because America's top tier educational system, particularly in the STEM fields, I have my grievances with the humanities too, but when it comes to the STEM fields, we are very proficient and have very high-end sectors here, and our universities are one of them. And we should be proud of that, and we should integrate as many people who want to come here and have a high-end education. It is mutually beneficial. We get the money, they get the education, and they populate the world with individuals who have experience with the United States. That person-to-person connection can be poo-pooed by people who think soft power doesn't really exist, but it does. I don't think it's as nearly as
But let
important
me
a factor as hard
stipulate
power.
that you're right, that we have an excellent STEM society, and it's fine if the Chi-Coms come and go to our minors that are otherwise unusual. I just want to find some way of not offending people. But what if we threw the Chinese out of our STEM programs? Wouldn't that be mutually advantageous to us?
It could be, but these are also intelligence targets. I mean, insofar as we assume that a lot of these are individuals with ties to Chinese intelligence operations, as well as private enterprises and public enterprises that aren't necessarily tethered to Chinese intelligence, but are nevertheless assets. But the alternative is also true, that we are integrating a lot of individuals into this country who can bring back cultural attitudes to the Chinese that make conflict less likely. And we should want to see conflict between the United States and China never occur. We do not want a hot war with the Chinese. And so there's a soft power element to that, as well as a hard power deterrent aspect. I think the hard power deterrent aspect is far more important. It's the sort of thing we should rely on. But we should also not discount the notion that America's great and good efforts across the world to demonstrate the superiority of the American system, of the democratic system, of the free market system. That's the sort of thing that we should proudly promote and not hamstring ourselves by saying, by the notion that our own self-confidence is something that we should be ashamed of or that we don't
No,
deserve it.
I don't disagree with you. I'm just saying the trade off is there are kids who do not get into programs at elite universities who are Americans who are displaced by Chinese nationals who go back to China. So would a scalpel, not a shotgun, but a scalpel approach that says, if we have any places left over, we will take a member of the Chinese community from the CCP, but we're going to fill up. And as a condition of being a U.S. university, you are going to invite any qualified American to fill that job.
Sure, I can be convinced of that. That's not an especially controversial proposition as far as you've put it to me. Um, and I think that would be fine. It's certainly the case as far as I understand it at state schools. But if you're talking about the Ivies, for example, yeah, where they shop for students, particularly those who are foreign and pay the full freight. The other thing is that you can get subsidized student loans if you're a domestic American student, but you can't if you're a foreign student. You got to pay the full freight, which makes them very attractive to very high-end schools. The other thing is happening in education now
Hold
that
on one
is
second.
percolating.
We've got to go to a break, Noah.
Sure.
Can I keep you for an extra segment?
Yeah, yeah, of course.
Yeah, because I want to know, how old are you, Noah? Are you 45?
I'm 43.
You're 43. I'm pretty close. What do you think the world's going to look like when you're my age, which is 69? Because I think maybe China might be running everything unless we get our act together in a hurry, and it does not make me sanguine. I want to find out what you think. Don't go anywhere, America. Noah Rothman will be back in just a moment. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Noah Rothman's with National Review. He's also one of the contributors to the Editor's Podcast, one of the must-see, listen-to podcasts out there. You should subscribe and like to this. While you were during the break, Noah, I got a couple of additional statistics. More than 1,000 universities have students that, 162 universities have more than 1,000 students from abroad. It is a big part of the business model for many universities, and 277,000 students come from China each year. That's the backdrop. Now, my big question to you is, are you sanguine about the future of the United States vis-a-vis China?
So I am. I don't want to be Pollyanna-ish about it. We face some very serious challenges. And I've seen us rise to some of those challenges, but not nearly with the alacrity that I would like. That being said, one of the West, especially America, but in the West generally, one of our biggest strengths is our capacity for self-criticism, self-correction, and transparency, which is not something that totalitarian systems evince. And what have we seen from China in the last couple of years? In early 2024, Xi purged his military. after the discovery, reported in Bloomberg that corruption was so rampant in the PLA that its weapons platforms didn't work. And these system failures were not being reported upward. It was a big scandal when it was discovered, and it resulted in a purge of officers and cadres within the military establishment, which, as we know from history, doesn't necessarily go well. Combine that with the revelation that we had in May that the Chinese economy is slowing, and the Chinese don't want you to know it. So they are vanishing their statistics. The word vanishing is what the Wall Street Journal reporters used in order to hide from the world what we can all see with our own eyes vis-a-vis the productivity that's coming out of China. The elements of opacity here are the detriment, and some would argue the downfall, of totalitarian systems, particularly those that reject market economics. Market economics is the best pathway, the best mechanism for human flourishing, and it will always be the envy of the world to those who want to aspire to the American lifestyle.
They also remain very resource constrained. They are dependent upon imports reaching their shores from far-flung places, whether it's Indonesia or Africa or the States. So they're not Superman. Do you think we are organized, and by organized, I do not mean command and control. Do you think we have prioritized the necessary inputs to make ourselves competitive with China long term?
In what way? So militarily or
defense,
economically?
economically. Militarily, we're behind, but we can catch up in a hurry. But economically is a very big palette on which to paint. And whether or not we're ahead in supercomputing AI, I don't know because no one knows the answer to that.
No, I don't think there is an answer to that. We're in an arms race. There's a moonshot going on between the United States and China with the development of generative AI. And the nation that gets there first will write the rules. And all the while, everybody who's researching AI will experience immense productivity gains. We're already seeing immense productivity gains associated with AI. When it comes to economics, again, not being an expert, I would imagine that that will produce significant gains for the country that masters that technology and writes the rules and exports and has the IP. When it comes to militarily, our weapons platforms are the best in the world. We make more of them than our competitors. We export more of them than our competitors. We are right now far better positioned than I think a lot of our critics believe. And if the United States were to ever have to assume a war footing, real deal, the entire industrial economy dedicated to the production of weapons platforms and weapons elements, I think you would see a kind of juggernaut like the world has never known. We are the third largest economic manufacturing power on the planet Earth. We're one of the largest economies when it comes to the consumer base. We can support that kind of mission as sustained power projection in ways that no other country on the planet Earth can. That is an immense benefit, but it's not one that is guaranteed to us by God. It needs to be maintained and assured. And I don't see that happening with the kind of urgency that I would like to see it. But that doesn't mean we're in a bad place or on our back foot. Not yet.
I have a suggestion and a request, Noah. The request is that you stay one more segment, and the suggestion is think about this during the break. Can you stay another segment, Noah?
Yes.
All right. The suggestion is that you and Rich Lowry get together with the rest of the team and ask an AI ChatGPT to generate an entire issue of National Review using all your bylines. All right, so use everybody's byline, everyone who's normally in the book, just see what it turns out. And then when I come back, I want to talk to you about why you think we are qualitatively ahead in the military realm when I can't even find what the $157 billion in the One Big Beautiful Bill is supposed to go to in any kind of precision. I don't know that we're ahead, but I'd love to hear. I'd love to be encouraged, Noah. Don't go anywhere. Noah Rothman and I are talking about existential matters on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt on this Tuesday, keeping Noah Rothman from National Review well past his, I don't know, you're going to go garden or play golf or something like that. No, I'm glad you stuck around. Noah, why do you think we can match China in a military confrontation when I view it would be over before the shooting began, much like Israel and the United States overpowered Iran?
I'd like to hear how you assume that China would essentially win this war within hours. Is that your proposition?
Hypersonics.
Yeah, they lead. They're doing very good in hypersonics. I don't know if they lead in hypersonics. Where China is making great strides is in disruptive technology, AI-enabled technology. They're focusing on very advanced platforms, drones. That's the sort of thing that where they're trying to achieve an advantage. I don't necessarily think I've never seen a military analyst suggest that the United States has a disadvantage in material terms, not yet. But where the United States has advantages are really profound and should not be underestimated. Naval projection, our capacity to project force in the form of our naval carriers, is unrivaled. Our adaptability and innovation is pretty much unparalleled. We're learning quite a lot from our allies, rather, who are engaged in hot wars in the Middle East and in Europe. Our alliances are far less costly to maintain. They are not coercive. That's the sort of thing that can also be undervalued because of our alliance structure is so robust and predicated on a balancing structure, balancing against the adversaries in their regions, our frontline partners, as opposed to a Chinese strategy, which is far more coercive. And that gets expensive. Again, there are a million caveats and challenges. Steve Feinberg, when he was being confirmed as Deputy Secretary of Defense, said, one of the things we need to do is start to integrate a lot of the private economy, the private manufacturing sector into the defense industrial base so that we can ramp up production with the speed that we need to. We've seen shortages now in defensive munitions in particular, but also offensive munitions like 155-meter artillery shells because of the extent to which our allies need them. That tells you a lot about the deteriorating threat environment abroad, which is not good, not something we should welcome and something
Well,
we should
let
absolutely
me
be
pause
preparing
here.
for.
We saw in Russia when Ukraine used smuggled drones to strike their strategic bombers, and we saw Israel use smuggled drones to decapitate the Iranian leadership. And those are closed society. Russia and Iran are closed society. We're an open society. Do you think for a moment the Chicoms don't have that kind of capacity in the United States somewhere?
If they don't, they're certainly working on it or infiltrating it right now. I'm
A-
absolutely
And do
terrified
you
of the drone swarm that attacks our unprotected long-range strategic bombers, for example, which we rely on more than the Russian, for example, nuclear triad. Yeah,
and there are only
huge
20 of
threats.
them. There are only 20 of them. And
Yeah.
and
No,
they also
there are
have
huge threats,
a
but we also underestimate the degree to which technology begets more technology that counters that technology. We could be seeing countervailing technology that disables incoming drone storms as soon as we get our hands around the threat. So it's just one of the straight line projections in this business lead you astray pretty frequently.
Do you think Team Trump is bringing in the Palantirs and the Lucky Palmer Luckies, and the next generation of defense tech at a fast enough rate, or is it still sclerotic?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't have any inside information on that. I would hope to say that the administration recognizes the scale of the threat. And I think we have evidence to suggest public and, Kremlinology, insofar as it's Kremlinology that we have to sort of pick apart the little bits of evidence that we have before us. But I think we can see that this president is interested in meeting the threats where they live before they become threats to American national security, directly threats to American national security. We have a couple of incidences now when it comes to Ukraine and Iran that suggest that this administration is interested in a proactive, extroverted presence on the world stage. And that's step one. Just simply
Last question:
acknowledging that we are a resident of the world is step one.
Do you think the Republican Party remains the party of overwhelming peace through strength and military prowess, or have the restrainers reached critical mass to the point that we're going to sit out any battle for Taiwan or the South China Sea?
I don't know how you can look at the last several weeks of this administration and say that the restrainers are in the driver's seat of public policy. They have been rebuked by this president in word and deed more times than I can count on two hands now over the course of the last 2 months. Now, this administration has some schizophrenic elements to it. It could return to that sort of form in very short order. But for right now, it's not the restrainers who are in the driver's seat. Rather, in fact, they're in the back seat getting lectured to, which is frankly, given the degree to which we're confronting threats that they don't seem to recognize our threats, is where they belong.
Last headline, Wall Street Journal: Trump to resume sending weapons to Ukraine. I'm very pleased by this. I'm very encouraged by this. What do you think, Noah Rothman?
I am encouraged, but it's very preliminary. Talk is cheap. I want to see action. We got some very disturbing reports out of Dutch and German intelligence over the course of the last 24 hours, indicating that the Russians are deploying choking elements on the battlefield, chemical agents, in their
Oh,
pursuit of territorial gains. These are unconfirmed reports, but both intelligence agencies have lent credence to them. And that is a new stage of this conflict, one that would be very, very dangerous and suggestive of the increasing strain under which Russian forces are operating. We mistake our adversaries for juggernauts. They have their own weaknesses. They're encountering their own limitations. And we don't know how they will react when they hit a wall. We're starting to see Russia hit a wall. We might see China hit one too sooner than we think.
all right, Noah. Thank you for the extra time today. What do you think about my AI generated NR issue from cover to the end? Every
I
word.
think
You have to.
it would be full. It would be full of lies, Hugh. ChatGPT is a liar. It is job security for me because everybody who outsources their thought processes and research to this tool ends up discrediting themselves and keeps me employed. So I welcome
Well, I
the AI
agree with you. I have never used it for anything. I won't even trust it for a quote. But nevertheless, I think it would be a fun thing to read. It'd be like a National Lampoon edition of the National Review. Noah C. Rothman, follow him on X. I appreciate the extra time today. Noah, I wanted to cover a few things with you that I normally don't do with someone who is not as well versed in as many subjects as you are. So thank you for the time. Don't go anywhere, America. I'll be right back. I'll give you the market report.